Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today I'm going to demonstrate 3 ways to blend your watercolours on the paper, and also how to soften and blend edges into the white of the paper. I'm only going to use 2 colours for this demonstration, ultramarine and burnt sienna. These are my 2 go-to colours for creating greys, so I use them quite a lot in much of my work. So let's start with the first method, blending on dry paper, where you paint the 2 colours side by side and then let them touch blend. So I'll start with painting some burnt sienna. Just paint a couple of squares. This is a sort of a milky mix, not too watery, so you know the consistency of the paint. Just move it around a little bit until it's nice and even. Clean the brush thoroughly and then paint some ultramarine, coming in from the right, moving towards the burnt sienna. Just leave a gap for the moment. Just get this nice and even. Then I'm just going to move the blue until they touch, and then just leave them, and they will blend sort of organically. Okay, so while those 2 colours are blending together, let's do the same thing, but we're going to use wet paper this time. I'm going to wet the paper first, and we'll see what difference it makes. I'm just going to paint this rectangle with some clear water. Just let that soak into the paper. One thing to note about when you're painting with watercolour is wherever you've stopped painting, the paint doesn't spread anymore. It only stays where you've painted. That's because the water's sinking into the paper and it's creating a boundary. And the same thing with this wet area. It's created a boundary where only the paint will go, but it won't go outside of that area. So let's now do the same thing on the wet paper while it's still wet. Again, this is a milky mix of colour, not too watery. Again, start towards one side and then bring it together. And just let them mix together in the middle. What you can do with this is get some more of the burnt sienna, paint it over onto the blue, and then get some more of the blue and paint it onto the burnt sienna, just overlapping a little bit, and let those 2 mix together. While it's still wet, you can tidy things up a little bit. Make sure you've got some nice edges. Maybe lift some of the paint out there. And let's see how that dries. We'll leave those drying. Incidentally, I recently made a video about whether or not to wet the paper when you're painting in watercolours. I'll put a link up to the right so you can have a look at that. Gives you a bit more insight into painting on wet paper and painting on dry paper. Okay, for the third method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the whole area with the burnt sienna. Just paint a rectangle. Again, this is on dry paper. Okay, and while that's still wet, I'm going to paint the ultramarine over to the right hand side on top of the burnt sienna, and you'll notice that the blue, the ultramarine, becomes much darker. because of the burnt sienna underneath, but also when they blend together you get a much softer edge. Tidying it up a little bit so that it's more of an even blend. Okay, while those are drying, I'm going to demonstrate how you can blend your colour into the white of the paper with, to create a soft edge. Let's say I'm painting an area where I want a hard edge to the left and a soft edge to the right. So I'll start with again, it's a fairly milky pigment. Let's use the ultramarine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint just short of where I want it to start blending. And the trick here is not to be too slow with this, because you do not want a hard edge to form on the right. So on the left I'm going to have this hard edge, and on the right, so what I've rinsed my brush, clean water, and then take most of the water off and just start to blend this end of the rectangle. Rinse the brush again, dry it off, take off any pigment, just a clean damp brush, and just softly blend it in. While it's still wet, you can move the pigment a little bit, but don't mess with it too much because you will mess it up. Do not add any water. Damp brush, just feather the end, that's it. And there you have it. 3 techniques for blending together and how to blend into the white of the paper. Just as an added thing, if you mix ultramarine and burnt sienna together, you can create a range of cool and warm greys. The more blue in the mix, the cooler the grey will be. So this is with more blue in the mix. Just paint a simple rectangle. So that's a cool grey. Let's add some more raw burnt sienna. And this should be a warmer grey. Do try this if you're new to watercolours. It's a good way of getting to know your palette. Try these methods using 2 complementaries and see how you get on. You'll be surprised how quickly you'll understand how watercolours work. Plus it's a bit of fun and messing around with colour, and that's how it should be. So I hope you learned something from this. It's a quick demonstration, but I've been asked to do it by a few subscribers, so I hope I've explained it pretty well. I mean, it's a pretty rough and ready demonstration, but I think you get the point. I hope you found this useful. Do give it a like if you did, and do subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos. And thanks again for watching.